name is Vickie Gibbs. I was most recently the executive director over at the UNC Eship Center, and now continuing work and work I'm very passionate about with OHUB as a part of these two certificates. And I am really excited to introduce this wonderful panel we have with y'all tonight. So we've got Rodney Sampson, founder of OHUB and 100 Black Angels and Allies, and then we have 3 leaders in the region: Thom Ruhe with NC Idea, Jes Averhart, wearer of many hats and influencer locally, and Trapp, head of community engagement with RTP. I'm going to let them give you a full introduction into themselves, and then we're going to have a very lively conversation. So excited to have y'all here. I'm going to start off, Rodney, with you so that you can also tee it up about what this investor certificate is all about, and then give us a little background on you and why you're doing this work.
Absolutely. Well, how's it going, everybody? Excited to see you all out. I'm just grateful that we can get together in person just for a little while, and hopefully we can do that going forward. So I appreciate everyone doing their part, respectively in that regard. I'm excited to be over from Atlanta, Georgia, and it's really been a joy over the last 15 months to be a co-home visiting professor at UNC at Duke, albeit it was virtual. We spent so much time on Zooms, I felt like we're all family. And so I want to say kudos to Duke and UNC as well, and look forward to building the relationship and taking it to different levels. I want to spend a lot of time on my background, but contextually, if we go back 20 years ago, I was one of the first Black founders of a technology startup to raise venture capital. And I had never heard of venture capital until my 2 partners, who happened to be securities lawyers, were having these conversations about how we're going to raise all this money. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, how are we going to do this? I had never seen a prospectus, didn't know what an investor questionnaire was, didn't know what a capitalization table was, didn't know what a price round was, a note, and I'm just taking this all real time. And next thing I know, folks just started writing checks. And I was like, oh, this is really a thing. And so that startup actually ended up raising over $4 million. We were pioneers in the internet streaming business, following in the footsteps of Mark Cuban, who developed multicasting technology and sold his streaming company, Broadcast.com. That's how Mark Cuban became a billionaire, is he was in the streaming business. And so we built a software layer on top of that, company called Multicast Media Technologies, and we own a company called StreamingFaith.com. So if you've ever watched your favorite pastor or church on the internet, that's because of the technology we created. And we were fortunate enough to build that company. Now, at the time, like many people who get opportunities, I was heads down, working, building, selling. And then I figured out, wait, I'm the only Black person in these rooms. I would go to trade shows and go to conferences. And, I grew up in Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, SWATs, Frederick Douglass High School, Tulane University, Omega Psi Phi fraternity. I was in the culture, right? And then I looked around and said, something here, not right, when I actually pulled my head out of the sand. And no one was really tracking the data back then. But what I realized is that when you meet a Black person that has raised venture capital or is in a position to invest that capital, they are an outlier. All of us today in America, unfortunately, could fit on one airplane. And God forbid that airplane didn't make it. That's how small the Black technology startup and venture ecosystem is. Harlem Capital put out a report, 2019, they updated in 2020. There have only been 305 Black and Latinx founders of tech companies that have ever raised over $1 billion in the last 20 plus years. Only 305 of us. Compare that to 2019, according to the National Venture Capital Association, there were more than 11,000 mostly non-Black firms that got venture capital. And last year, in the middle of a pandemic, while 41% of Black businesses were shut down, 39% unemployment in the Black community, venture capital had its best year ever, $156 billion in 2020. This year, the first 2 quarters have already surpassed that. And so the capital markets and individuals who have capital are doubling down on investing in this asset class because the future of automation, the future of digital, the future of technology, engineering, machine learning is here. And I just felt like while there's been a lot of traction and conversation on getting more capital to Black founders and venture funds, that we weren't having a conversation in our own community with our allies on moving some of the money that does exist. And so we started the 100 Black Angels and Allies Fund. Well, it was originally the 100 Black Angels Fund. And then last year, Brad Feld, you may know him as one of the founders of Techstars and Founder Group. Brad said, if I write a check, can we add allies to it? So we changed the name of the fund to 100 Black Angels and Allies Fund. There are probably roughly about 20 Black active venture capitalists in the country compared to probably maybe 1,000 or so active VCs that exist. Why is this important? Then I'll pause. Is 60% of net new jobs are coming from companies that are venture backed and fueled. And so where's the influence on job creation, negotiating for opportunities, for procurement, for impact, or for data? Where's that lie? It lies with the investors. Investors have a tremendous amount of influence on who they invest in, and then those companies also look to them for mentorship and introductions and connections. So in America today, 1% to 2% of Black Americans are considered to be accredited by the Securities and Exchange Commission and can invest in this asset class. But most people don't know that the asset class exists because think about it. Most of us don't hear about tech companies until they're very big or they're being acquired or going public. And so this ecosystem is really stealth. Like for instance, how many people before you came in here tonight knew about this place and that they're startups and small businesses? And if you look around, you may not notice, you may not know who these companies are today, but like the next unicorn, the next, $1 billion startup could be sitting here and you could be working for it, you could be investing in it, but if you don't know it. And so a part of why we partnered up, I spoke at the Breakers back in January 20 before things shut down. And I wouldn't have gone to the Breakers if Jes hadn't said, Rodney, you really need to go. And I was like, Jes, I speak a lot. I'm like, I didn't say yes at first. She kept asking, it's probably on the fourth one. I said, Jes, if you say I should go, I'll go. And I did. I met the UNC team. We had a great time. And after that, they asked me to join as a visiting professor. And whenever I go somewhere, I like to leave a legacy. And I feel like these certificate programs, and particularly this one that's focused on getting more Black people and allies who are committed to racial equity in the ecosystem to invest. So I took a little bit longer time to give you some context and framework for why we asked all of you to leave your safe havens and come out with us tonight. And thank you, of course, to all the people that are watching online. Thank you to our colleagues at Duke and Stanford, to the links, to Adam Klein. Thank you for taking time as well. And we appreciate your partnership. And to everyone that's watching live, please hashtag this. Please get the word out. Hashtag, we got to make up a hashtag. What's the hashtag? Hashtag Black Tech Ecosystem Investment. Y'all figure it out. But anyway, please amplify this, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Rodney. Thom, do you want to introduce you and why this is important work for you?
Make me follow him, all right? I'll start by saying I'm glad Brad wrote a big enough check that you felt comfortable putting allies on top of that. I'm Thom Ruhe. I'm the CEO of NC Idea. NC Idea is an independent private foundation right 2 blocks over on the American Tobacco campus. So we're 501c3, but a private foundation. I use the word independent because unlike a lot of foundations, there is a family behind the money, right? Gates, you think Gates, think Ford, Foundation, where I was for 7 years, there was a Mr. K. There was no Mr., Mrs., or family to our original source of funding. It just came from a boring equity investment that the state of North Carolina made in the late 90s. It paid off in the early 2000s. And before the folks in Raleigh did what the folks in Raleigh do, namely go after the found money once there was an exit, my predecessor, Dave Rizzo, who was the founder of the organization, that's a name I'm sure that some folks are resonating with, they had enough common sense to sequester a chunk of that money and put it into a nonprofit entity so that something more long-term can be done with it. So what do we do with our money, and what do we do in general? We advocate for everyone in North Carolina to realize their full potential. I like to say economic emancipation through entrepreneurial aspiration. And that's really what we're trying to do, is help people realize their full economic potential by pursuing a startup, that has the opportunity, has the potential to create jobs, revenue, raise private equity, have an exit, and most importantly, create wealth. Of the last 5 years, I've been in the role for over 5 years now. The board that brought me in, the team that we've built over those 5 years, have made an unwavering commitment to equity, right? And that everything we have to do is equitable. So we looked at the first several years of our grant making, for example, and we looked at who's getting all the grants. And we say tongue in cheek, and don't tell anybody this publicly, it's just us in this room, right? It's not going out on the interwebs, but the bad inside joke was 2 white kids from Duke with an app that did fill in the blank, right? And then every once in a while we'd screw up and give a grant to somebody in Charlotte. And I'm joking, so in case that's not coming through with masks and whatnot, not that I'm wearing one, but that was kind of historically the portfolio, and I had no interest in leading an organization that did that. And the board, to their credit, said then, what do you want to do? And the team, we came together and said, we've got to be statewide, and we have to really go after historically underserved markets, which we have defined as Black and brown founders, female founders, and folks in our rural communities that are very much underserved as well. And we put a goal down, and we said that no less than half of our money, our grants, our time, our services, our programs have to be in service to these underserved groups. Fast forward 5 years later, I'm happy to report we're crushing those numbers. We're well over 80%. So it's not that we said, 2 white kids from Duke need not apply. What we really focused on is saying, what do we have to do to give them a lot more competition for the money? And so that's meant an evolution to our programs, in particular our funding programs. And one of the things that we had the epiphany on is if you look at our flagship grant program, which is $50,000, by the way, it's free money. So, there's some funders in this room. You can go talk to Jeff over there. He's got his checkbook on there. I'm happy to whip out, or Jason, I should say, Mr. Kaplan over there. He'll write you a check right now on the spot, but he'll want something for it. We don't take anything for it. It's free money, so it's good money. It's non-dilutive. But when you look at the companies that were successful in winning grants at that later stage, what you find very quickly is to survive to that point, to be competitive, there are so many things that have to happen earlier in the life cycle around ideation, having support, access to networks, capital, credit, things like that, and more risk-tolerant money. So we created 3 years ago the micro grant program so that we could put a lot more money much earlier stage, and lo and behold, the diversity came pouring through, proving that everybody is born equal with entrepreneurial potential. What's unequal is the access to the capital, the resources, the networks, the credit, on and on and on. I feel silly sitting next to this man even trying to articulate all the inadequacies. He's writing the book on it. So our response to that was great. We're doing what we're doing with our grants and our programs. But a year and a half ago, we felt even with that ambition, it was inadequate. So we really wanted to do something that was specifically focused on advancing Black entrepreneurship in the state of North Carolina, with a very small, humble goal of making North Carolina the best state in the nation for Black founders to start and grow companies of high potential. So we formed and created this thing called the North Carolina Black Entrepreneurship Council. The NCBEC, as we refer to it, is a council of 25 leaders in this community across the state, from various walks of life, services, backgrounds, just a very nice, diverse group of professionals. And us understanding that our role in supporting this effort is to know what our lane is. And our lane is simply to fund it, but leave the control with the council to decide how to spend money, how to serve this group, this constituency. Yeah, here's a little secret about foundations, especially the bigger they get. There's this thing called the assumption of complete knowledge, right? Because you have money, so you think you're smart. And you can also have the curse of good intentions. So a guy with my complexion can feel sympathetic to the cause and say, let's go do something, but I've got blind spots, that you can drive the car through. So the novel concept here is like we have to form a council of the people we seek to serve, and then we have to trust them to tell us how to deploy the money. What are the priorities in the programming? And that's what we did with the formation of the council. Our board and staff has stepped up. We put the first $1 million under the control of the council. We've recently had a very strategic partner that has joined us in this effort. I am, in fact, walking around the state of North Carolina with my tin cup begging for money, asking other entities to join us in this. But Trapp here from the Research Triangle Foundation, they made a $1.25 million commitment to the work that we're doing, half of that being allocated to the BEC specifically. And I am happy to report that as of yesterday's full BEC council meeting, Mr. Trapp is now an official member of the BEC as well. Thank you. So I guess I'm not going to be as brief as Rodney was, and I apologize for that, but hopefully that gives you some context. We're just thrilled to be here. Thank you, Carl, Peter, for hosting this wonderful event and your great menu. I'm always happy to be back here. It's an inspirational place with a really great vibe. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Jes, you've had a long stretch here in the area and done lots of different things and are now under your own brand. Talk a little bit about why this work is important and how you've integrated what you've done to support Black people.
Yeah, so Jes Averhart with Jes Co. I'm really glad to be here because I'm looking around this room and see my co-founder of Black Wall Street Homecoming Splash Rose up here. We're missing two, there are 4 of us. Carl, thanks for hosting. I don't know where Peter is, but just it's great to be out in your community talking about these issues, talking about the opportunities more so than issues, right? There's a great amount of opportunity here. My background and maybe why I'm sitting here really has to do with my original work, my initial work in Durham with the American Underground. So I'm just a regular person who comes from a real estate family from a very small town in Ohio, and I land in Durham and I get an opportunity to work at the American Underground, which is just like this. It's like Providence, really building up founders and helping them see their potential and grow, develop disruptive companies. That's the hope. And so while I was there, I was learning language. And this, you all were laughing at me, but I brought this on purpose. Really, you have to read books like this to understand the language, right? And so if you don't have the ecosystem around you to support you as you're thinking about your own dreams, when you wake up in the morning, you don't know how to raise that money and scale, you have to do the work. You go out to Google, you can do the YouTube videos, you can read books by Brad Fell and soon Tom's book that's coming out on this work, or you can look at a framework that I know we're going to talk about in a minute. But I guess what I'm saying is I didn't have this background and I had to immerse myself. I was lucky enough to immerse myself in a tech environment here in Durham, fortunately, at the American Underground and with Providence as well, to learn this stuff. And we don't have the luxury of that time. We don't have the luxury of those resources surrounding us without something like what Rodney has developed. And so I'm glad to be here as a community member. I'm also really thrilled that you all saw earlier our national presidents of the Links Incorporated. I'm a member of the Durham chapter of the Links Incorporated. So we're excited to be able to bring something like this from the sky, the pie in the sky, down into our community so that we can really fully grasp it, understand it, and deploy it within our communities. Investing in our community is still important. Investing in tech companies, the potential that exists here in this room today, right now, and a mile from here, and take that pebble and, Durham really has an amount of possibility and potential, and most of us don't really even know that. I think about Google, the Black Founders Exchange program that has been here for 5 years. And you heard Adam talk about the amount of money that has been invested in those companies. Those founders were in our city for a week at a time. They were pitching here. They were explaining their businesses. And I didn't invest in a single one of them. I didn't invest in a single one of them. And I spent an entire week with them for 5 years and got to know them personally. And I watched them. I follow them on Instagram, right? I'm watching them on Twitter, and I'm watching them grow and scale. And I don't have a single dollar invested in those companies. Now I have an investment locally now, but it's the potential here that we're talking about tonight that we'll unpack, or that you'll talk more about, because it's your framework. The opportunity there is it's vast, and it can change communities, it can change generational lives, and it can change generational wealth. And we know that gap is broad, but this really is a moment I think that we all need to really pay attention to and get invested in, literally and figuratively, if it's something that we're interested in doing. So,
Yep, well, that was great. Thanks, Jess. All right, rounding us out, Ray, the head of community engagement for RGP. Introduce yourself and talk about why you're passionate about this.
Absolutely. So I am Ray Trapp. I am Vice President of Strategic Engagement for the Research Triangle Foundation of North Carolina. We are the stewards of Research Triangle Park. So native North Carolinian, but went to high school in Atlanta. And so I always, anybody that's from Atlanta, spent time in Atlanta knows when someone says, I'm from Atlanta, your next question is, where? So I graduated from Clarkson High School and spent time in DeKalb County. I grew up in a household with a father that had 3 jobs, and he was entrepreneurial in nature, very much so. He worked for MetLife and he worked for New York Life, and from there, he said, why would I spend my time and energy making money for other people? So he started an independent insurance agency on his own. So he took that knowledge, and I grew up around that. I grew up in DeKalb County in Atlanta, and that's what you saw. You saw people that were out there that had an entrepreneurial spirit, that didn't think that there was anything that they could not do. Black folks. So for me, that was the change. So when I was in North Carolina, you maybe had 1 or 2 Black people that owned their business that I knew, that I came in contact with. So to go to Atlanta and see that and grow up around that sparked something in me that I also had that same thing. It wasn't about what I wanted to do, it's if I wanted to do it. And so that mindset is something that I think that we have to pass down, and we have to believe that we can do. And so when I look at the extraordinary amount of capital that we have in the Black community, and being in this building, and how historic this building is and what it means, that's what we have to get back to. We have to get back to taking care of our own. And if we want to do something, doing it ourselves. I'm going to say something that'll probably get me in trouble, but between the links and the boule, we can fund every single tech idea that we have in the Black community. All we have to do is access the capital in those 2 groups. I'm sure that I'll probably don't get into the I'm sure I'll probably never get into boule now, but I wanted to put that out there. But it's the truth. Yeah. It's absolutely the truth. So the mindset of us doing for self and us owning our own things, that's what we have to go back to. Even to the D9 and to HBCUs. I am grateful for Duke, Stanford, and UNC for taking this up, but Morehouse should be at the table. Spelman should be at the table. My alma mater, North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, and I say that in Durham, so NCCU should be at the table. Everyone should be at the table. So over the 100+ HBCUs and alumni chapters all across the world, each one of those is a potential angel fund that should be started. So that is 100+ venture capital funds that should be turning out businesses every year. So we shouldn't have this conversation of where you can only fit the number of Black founders that have raised over $1 million on one plane, because we should be churning out at least 100 from the number of HBCUs every year. So a little bit more about why this is important to me, and especially the tech aspect of this. So my 8-year-old, I talk to him all the time. He's like a grown man. So I'll say the conversation around what you want to be when you grow up is completely different than my conversation. At 8, I wanted to be a football player. I wanted to be Drew Pearson. I wanted to play for the Cowboys. That's exactly what I wanted to do. When I talk to my 8-year-old about what he wants to do, he tells me he wants to be a coach. That is what he wants to do. So the whole world is completely changing. I just left my alma mater working in the chancellor's office doing external affairs. Those kids that are coming out of computer science and coming out of engineering do not want to work for anyone. Their dream is to not go work for someone else's tech firm, is to start their own. So every single one of them that comes from a computer science program, that comes from an engineering program, that wants to start a business, we should be right there handing them the check, encouraging them to go forward and make that business, to spin out, to, as Jes said, change generational wealth and creating generational wealth within our own communities. So again, it's time for us to do for self, and I'm all about this work, and I'll be here for it.
Thanks. Thank you so much for those intros. That was wonderful. So now we're going to kick off a little bit of a conversation. So we're here talking about this Black technology ecosystem investor certificate. And that's a lot about exposure, and it's about education, because there's a gap. Like you were saying, Jes, you hadn't invested in any of those companies, probably because you weren't sure how to, what, all that kind of stuff. So how important, and this goes back to some of the work you've also done, Rodney, on the equity districts, but how do we sort of think about the exposure and education, and how do we sort of put a call to action for people so that everyone who's sitting on the sideline looking, saying, yes, I want to invest in the Black founder that's doing the tech company or with the app or what have you with the scalable business, how do we get there? So what can you say to the people in the audience, the people here, as far as how do you get to action, and how does it become something that's not scary and something that you can really embrace? And y'all can start wherever you want.
You know, I've been accused of sort of being a lot of times very pie in the sky-ish, you know, but I think those of us that have resolved that we think like this, you know, we eventually find our place, you know, in the sky or something. So the blue sky opportunity is, you know, I think a part of how this certificate was also inspired is last year, you know, the untimely murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and others prompted federal agencies to start having, especially the career folks, not the appointees. You know, in any presidential administration, you have appointees that come in, they come and go. They're the career folks that work. And usually an appointee might be someone who just bundles enough money and they're paying them back over that. But the people who work on a day-to-day basis, last year, were saying one of the ways that we can advance racial equity in the capital markets is to modernize the definition of the current accreditation rule. Now, in those who enroll in the certificate, we're going to talk about the rule, how it was created, how it was quote unquote put in place, you know, after the Great Depression to protect investors from themselves, losing everything. And those of us in the, you know, Black community or a socially disadvantaged quote unquote community may hear something different when someone says, I'm trying to protect you from something. It can come off as being paternalistic, patriarchal, etc. And so the SEC, folks that work at the SEC, noticed that in prior conversations. And so they put a modernization move forward that I had the opportunity to testify for, and it eventually passed. And so at a macro level, what we realized is that there's not a shortage of Black and brown folks in America that could invest in this asset class. But education is required. And if we can create a product that has not just theoretical constructs of investors, but actually investors teaching it and having other subject matter experts be a part of it, that one day, after we taught it a couple of times, we can go to the SEC and say, can we even modernize the rule again so that once you get certified, you can then become an accredited investor, which means we'll even increase the amount of people inside of Black America in particular that could invest. And okay, I took the time to kind of go down that rabbit hole because when you think about who should be able to invest in this asset class, we believe more people should be able to do it once they learn about it and once they become proficient at it than are doing it. And so we hope that this certificate program becomes a model that the United States Securities and Exchange Commission can look at, because in the modernization of the rules that they passed, the last time they had modernized the rules were 1940s. So we are operating off of 1940s rules in 2021. So they modernized it a little bit, and they kind of tease that in the future they would look at educational programs at accredited universities or accredited institutions as qualifiers for being accredited. So we literally are creating what we hope is the future. And it won't just be this program, hopefully there will be other programs. We're the only one in the country that is focused on educating Black people in particular and allies of Black people in particular. So I don't mean to get too wonkish as it relates to the policy, but we have to keep that in mind because in the next 4 or 8 years, the trillions of dollars, like right now there's ARPA, A-R-P-A, the American Recovery Plan Act. States are getting billions of dollars. Cities are getting hundreds of millions of dollars. Inside of ARPA, you have the SSBCI, State Small Business Credit Initiative, which I testified in front of Congress back in 2010. It got passed. It got re-upped again as a part of ARPA. States are going to get $200 million each, 200 times 50, $10 billion, to basically invest in small businesses. And startups count as small businesses. Behind that, we have the American Innovation and Competition Act, $250 billion that passed the House. I'm sorry, stand corrected, passed the Senate. And a part of that $10 billion is now going through the House. It's called the Endless Frontier Act to create 18 new regional tech hubs. So what I'm saying is, now that the federal government is about to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in ensuring that America is the most innovative country on the planet for the foreseeable future, this is our last opportunity to find out about this train that's moving. And matter of fact, if you're part of building the tracks, usually we miss the train, it's gone. We get to build the tracks, we get to assemble the train, we get to hire the folks who are going to work on the train. Matter of fact, we might own a piece of the train, and that new infrastructure takes us forward. And so investing is a sure way in to make sure that you can participate in that future wealth that's being created. Other than that, Ray laid out, really, if you think about the Black community and where, in New Orleans, they say where the money resides, it's in organizations like the Links, it's in organizations like the Boule, it's in organizations, HBCUs, which are institutions. It's also in a lot of Black churches. When you think of Black institutions that have assets or the ability to acquire assets, those are our angel investors, venture funds, and the members of those organizations can be angel investors. And even the non-accredited ones can participate in crowdfunding, which we're going to talk about equity crowdfunding in the so hopefully that. Y'all already in the class. We're like class in session.
I trust that people smarter than me, like Rodney, worry about dealing with the SEC and getting regulatory reform. FYI, North Carolina has already received its $122 million first tranche of SSBCI money. My concern is they're going to just play the same playbook from 2010, which postmortem on that is like a C-. So it had some impact, but not as good as it could have been. Again, I'll let others worry about that. From our position, we're very close. We're on the front line because we're helping founders, in most cases first-time founders, day in, day out at their immediate need level. And so that gives us an interesting perspective to see where there's gaps in the market. And I'll tell you when it's glaring, and again, capitalize on something that you both, Ray and you had said, whether it's Blue Layer or any other organization, here in North Carolina, in the Triangle specifically, there's Can, Win, and Dan. Carolina Angel Network, Wolfpack Investor Network, and the Duke Angel Network. Okay? These are alumni angel funds that are doing great work to fund startups for students affiliated with either of those institutions. They've even gotten smarter in the sense that they're syndicating deal flow. And there was state funding that came through these Sheets funds for a while there, the VCMF, the Venture Capital Multiplier Fund, that said, hey, if two of y'all or more syndicate a deal, we don't even care, here's just some good money on top, right? So the question is, where are the HBCU alumni investor networks, right? I know, NCCU, we're working on one with the Eagle, I think they're called the EIN, the Eagle Investor Network, but A&T, like, come on, right? The money is there. It's sometimes I think the gap is just the hard work of the organizing effort, right? Sometimes it's not that people aren't willing, it's not easy enough for them to see it and engage it. And that's why a lot of the work we do focuses on exposure, focuses on the extent that we can with our limited resources to lead by example and say, hey, this is something that, anybody else can join in on. That's the message we've got, in particular for the BDC right now, right? We're standing it up. We're not asking other people to do something we're not willing to do, but we're saying we're willing to put money into this. We're willing to trust this constituency, this peer group, to define what are the greatest needs. Why don't you join us on this adventure, right? And we'll define new best practices in economic development that right now people aren't even considering. We celebrate, understandably so, Apple moves here, right? We celebrate Google's going to put 1,000 engineers about 1,000 feet from where we're sitting right now. And I understand why in economic development, but we also pour hundreds of millions of dollars in tax incentives. In North Carolina this year, we're going to break last year's record. We're going to have over 190,000 startups. 64,000 more than we had last year, which was a record, right? Cochrane data tells us that the startup in North Carolina, the average startup, will generate 4.89 jobs in its first year. Let's round it up to 5. We're all friends here, right? And let's say the increase is only 60,000 over last year's baseline. All right, group participation. You can get a beer up there to get this right. What's 60,000 times 5 jobs? 300,000. If we were willing, as a government, to throw $900 million at Apple for the promise of 3,000 jobs, what should we be investing in an organic jobs engine that can create 300,000 more jobs over the baseline? And what percentage of those are going to be from Black founders, brown founders, and others, right? It's supporting that, finding the political will, but it's messy and it's hard. And it doesn't, neatly tie into election cycles when somebody gets to stand in front of a ribbon cutting and say, yay, look what we did, right? So we have to find the partners that have the means, the juice, the access to say, okay, yeah, we're in this for the long haul. And it's measured in decades. I mean, the incentive plans that these companies are given 20, 25, in some cases 30 years to make good on those promises. Why can't we just take the same approach and invest in ourselves and what's happening organically right now in our own backyard? Because if we don't, we're going to finish this year with record new startups, and then 12 months from now, we're going to have record numbers of failures. If we don't stand up right now and support our startups. So that's my preaching for today.
Jes, you had
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of pull a thread on what you were sharing about HBCUs and where's A&T on this and just the community in general, because I want to be really clear, and I am preaching to the choir here a little bit, but the Black community invests. We invest. We're just not investing in tech companies. So it's really this demystifying of tech is what we're talking about today, because you're talking about a community that is highly aggressive around understanding and wanting to like embrace something new and create wealth. That is a real thing. And we do it, if I were to take a poll, we do it in real estate. We all, everybody who knows real estate investor, let's just raise a hand right quick. Right? This whole room knows a real estate investor, and then if I were to say who invests in real estate, the half the room probably would say, yeah, or I want to. And it's because we can touch it, we understand it, we own a home, we want to own a home. It's around us, it's familiar, the language is familiar, right? We know someone, we educate ourselves this way. So what we're talking about tonight is making it as accessible and as clear when we get into this other world that you said is it scary. You said, how do we make it not scary? Well, how do you make anything not scary? You have to get familiar with it. It has to be tactile. You have to have a framework. You have to have a model and a formula. And once that is laid out, and once you can get, it's enveloping you, and you start to practice and be experiential with it, you will see those rewards. And then we will start to see a scale, right? We're going to start to see our friends. We're going to start to see, and that's another piece of this, is that we were talking about this demystifying, or this, how to make it not scary. We do it together. It's also very cultural for us. We do things together. We create our own crowdfunding in our communities and in our neighborhoods to send our kids to school, right? To create scholarships, to do a rent party. We do that all the time. It's not a part of our culture. So this is no different. It's just reframing. It's just reframing. I think it's very exciting when you can start to do a force multiplier on the potential around investing in tech companies and founders and diversifying a cap table. Like, who owns that Black founded company? Oh, Black people own that, are helping to support and investing in that Black founded company. That is not happening right now. It is not happening. We are not investing in our own folks. And so their cap table doesn't look like us, and we need to shift that. But my point is that the interest is there, the desire, the appetite. We already are doing it. We just need to broaden the lens, shine a new light on this, and become educated and familiar with this language. And this is why I'm so interested in it. When we always talk, right? Every time Rodney comes to the table, he makes a compelling case. It's hard to walk away and say, well, damn, no, that's it. We're like, well, damn, why am I not in the sauce on this? Because if we are going to miss the boat, right? Getting in that asset class is very important. We are at a crucial moment in time. We make that case every time I talk to you.
I think even more fundamentally, just to what you said about what's cool or what's sexy and where we invest our money. So let's be real about it. STEM and tech aren't things that we think that we do. Yeah. So taking that back and understanding that we do. I see my brother Sigma over there. George Washington Carver, that's tech. Lewis Lavin, that's tech. Benjamin Banneker, that's tech. It's who we are. It's what we do. So changing that to what's sexy and what's cool, to realizing where we come from and where we start from. That tech is us. We are tech. We do tech. So we have to take that back and take ownership of that and say, yes, it is cool to be tech. It is cool to be a coder. It is cool to do whatever you want to do and make that thing yours. So we have to take ownership of that too. So it may not that you don't think it's sexy to be a tech person, but real estate is what's up. That's what you see on TV. That's what drives things. But no, we do tech. So we have to take back that narrative too.
And we're seeing, all of y'all's points, we're seeing some, early wins in that regard. Like last year, FAMU invested in Fearless Fund as an LP, because they had 2 alum there. We're LPs in Matt Ventures, Marlon Nichols, they closed on $110 million fund, but Howard is also an investor as well. Megan, I think of her last time right there, she was at Unusual Ventures. She was able to attract Spelman, Hampton, and the UNC CO. So it was relational. And so like regionally, I think, what we should aspire to is if we could get the CFOs of the regions, HBCUs, because understanding that in smaller institutions, the endowments may be managed by third party also, whose CFO is responsible for. And some of that, like in FAMU's case, it was their foundation and their endowment, and they had a third party. And what was interesting was we had to go to bat for the fund to the third party because the HBCU wanted to do it, and their third party manager, who I won't name, and remember their name because they kind of canceled in my mind after I brought them to Christ on this call. But they had said no because they were already invested in top tier funds, and I was often sometimes found on Twitter and different debates, and I was on the pretty popular investor who was on, not a main shark, but had been on Shark Tank. He was bragging about how many underrepresented minority funds he had invested in. As a response to me when I said, because there's a nascent amount of Black capital going into Black fund managers and Black founders, that to get the parity, Black institutions need to go into Black fund managers and founders first, and then they would diversify. And also the understanding, like I think of Mac Ventures, we're talking shop here. Mac Ventures over indexes in Black founders, but we're in deals like Pipe. Of course, we're at Squire. We're in some amazing companies that may not have Black founders. And they say, well, why does it make a difference? Well, at the end of the day, transactionally, the Black fund manager will get the management fee and the carry. So it does. So, but if you don't understand the unit economics of investing, you'll think that, well, if the money's going to get to the company, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter that some of it goes through the Black fund manager and some of it goes. But the ones who are oversubscribed would like our money, but really don't need our money. Whereas we need the money just to get the money.
Well, and what we're talking about is creating generational wealth for the Black community, right? And you do that through the individual investors, through the organizations, and through the founders, because the goal is that you're investing in Black founders who are creating generational wealth who can then invest it again, right? It becomes a virtuous cycle. And as you educate investors, they may want to do a direct deal, or they may want to go into it. They may want to go into 100 Black Angels and Allies, or Resilient Ventures with Key. And so there's lots of different places for money to go. And so the other thing that you'll learn in the certificate is what those different options are. Because to your point about the education, Jes, it's like you have to understand what are all of the tools I have to use. When you understand that it's a variety of tools, and then I can customize it based on how I want to invest, what I want to invest in, that's what's really powerful. So we're gonna open it up for questions here in a minute. So if anyone has questions here in the audience, let me know. Raise your hand. The one thing I want to continue the conversation on as we're waiting for people to raise hands is, all right, Tyrell, yes, what is your question?
I absolutely love what everybody's had to say so far. Amazing analysts, geniuses. What I would ask, so as we're thinking of demystifying tech, kind of, in terms of the Black community, what are some of the things that we can do moving forward to make sure that tech is more known in the community early on, and that when you're thinking about creating tech, you know about tech founders, because I didn't find out about venture capital or any substance out of UNC. So how do we make sure that the community is knowing about that moving forward?
I think a lot of it's on display right here, right now, right? It's funded this kind of programming, engaging in the community, getting the word out. Like Ray, my kids grew up in a house with a crazy old man that started a new company every 3 to 5 years, right? And over time, they figured out that Santa was bullshit because in the startup years, he was really stingy. But after Dad stole the company, Santa was like just incredibly generous. And I mean, I'm making fun about that, but the truth of the matter is, like, that's the water they swam in. So they grew up, all three of my kids were entrepreneurs before they were 10. That's just not a common enough experience in a lot of our communities. And so from a community engagement standpoint, it just takes effort. You know, people ask me all the time, what's like the secret to economic development and the work that we do? And I'll tell you guys, because it's really close-knit group here. The secret is there is no secret. It's just hard work, man. You got to grind it out. You got to show up. You got to preach the gospel of entrepreneurship. Right? And then over time, people will start believing you, right? But you got to make that effort. And then you got to get your ambassadors, those people that are willing to evangelize on your behalf after you've earned their respect, you know, by being authentic and credible. You know, I did an event 3 years ago in a black church in Southeast Raleigh on Saturday. There was only a white person in the room. I was on the panel, and a woman in the back was just pissed off that I was there. And she asked the question, you know, why are you here lecturing us about this? And yeah, and she was angry. And I get it. Like I to the extent that I can get it. I understood the anger, right? But all I could say to her is, I was here because I was invited. And I came. And I'm trying to show up. And my only piece of advice to her was, and if, by the way, you can only receive help from people that look like you exclusively, you may be missing out on other resources and opportunities that are here to help you. So I would just ask for a sliver of tolerance that, you know, I showed up on this Saturday morning because I was here talking about grants, dollars we have to support you. And so just try, and again, I understand all the historical reasons why your skepticism, but just keep an open mind and say, hey, there's help out here if you're willing to hear.
I got a question. You said you're the only white guy here. Was there black users or white people?
Blacks.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, she's very active in the ecosystem. When I walked up to her, she about fell out of her chair. She said, in a million years, I wouldn't expect you here today.
Yeah.
He was in the A&B line church.
Oh, okay. I mean, you know, pain can be your greatest, you know, you can be afraid of that pain. I like to repurpose it that your pain can be your greatest asset when you're out there. And there's just some things in our community that are probably our under-tapped unfair benefits. And I go back to like this incredible year. I mean, COVID, climate, you know, culture, everything collided at one time. And honestly, I think the lesson is we couldn't have asked for better, you know, lemonade potential. And I think we won't see it for the next 10, 20, 30 years maybe, but like the fact that, you know, the Links made their first investment in a venture fund. And Bridget, who leads economic development for Links, they invested in our venture fund. We got that deal done in 2 months. She said normally something like that might take a year. So there's this willingness for something new because I think people are like, what's been working isn't. And so if we can sort of like not put our pain to the side, I think everybody deserves their own pain. If you can productize that pain into something powerful, purpose. And you know, the playbook is here. When we're talking about all the players are represented in the room right now. We just gotta sync up on the terminology. Matter of fact, that book, Venture Deals, is one of the books you'll get in the certificate. We call this early exposure. And to be honest, as Black people candidly, all right, y'all in the cookout. As Black people candidly, when it comes to technology and automation, we gotta catch back up to ourselves. We gotta catch back up to ancient Connect, right? When we were the innovators, we gotta catch back up to Vickie Gibbs. We gotta catch back up to Catherine Johnson and Lonnie Johnson, who's still living, working on intergalactic space travel. There's a brother in Atlanta who created the Super Soldier, right? He casually talks about, he has a lab, he's got an 80,000 square foot lab downtown Atlanta. You wouldn't know it was there, you didn't know it. And you'll be walking around, it's like, what are you working on? He's like, I'm working on intergalactic space travel. And you're doing what? Oh yeah, we're working on an energy technology that's gonna, help us get to the next few galaxies away faster. He's saying it like he's serious. And he's like the same person who in 1968 won a science fair at the University of Alabama for creating a robot. And he was deflated because after he won first place, no one congratulated him amongst the judges. The University of Alabama didn't give him a full ride. But you know who gave him a full ride? Tuskegee. Right? And so our HBCUs have shown up, and I think that now's the opportunity for us to go beyond those institutions and expose coders, expose tech. We have to normalize these new terminologies to as many people as possible. And there's no more, whenever a politician is running for anything, always go to the Black church. The Black church is one of the distributors of information and opportunity. HBCUs, if you're running for elected officials, you try to get to an HBCU campus so you can ignite the students or what have you. We have to figure out how we do the same thing for tech, for startups, for venture capital, for crowdfunding, for artificial intelligence, for machine learning. And it's right there, and I think we're right on it's happening in this community, and it's happening in Atlanta. We might be a few steps ahead, but not too far when it comes to the tech work. It's happening in so many different communities outside of like these coastal hubs where you would expect, like Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. There'll always be tech hubs, but they're not going to be the great tech hubs of the future. And so it's really up for grabs. You see this great migration of folks from the coast coming back inland and trying to figure out where's the place where I can build, where can I build my family, cost of living, all those things are important. That's why Microsoft is coming to Atlanta building a 90-acre campus in the hood. The hood, y'all. All right? That's why Google's coming here with 1,000 jobs. And so y'all are gonna have to speak truth to power and basically say it's great that economic development is focused on attraction and retention, but y'all gonna have to split some of these resources up and we have to focus on our home. And so whatever small part that OHUB and 100 Black Angels, I think the certificate program can have, you all should be the greatest beneficiaries of this work, because the work for this certificate program, even though it's for the nation, actually for the world, we had someone sign up from Switzerland last week that wants to go through the Black Tech Ecosystem Investment. You all should be the greatest beneficiaries of it because it's birthright.
We actually had a question that sort of relates to that came across from someone online that is asking about if someone takes the certificate, they get the certificate, they want to become an investor, what's the least amount that a company would accept, or how did they get started is what I think they're really trying to figure out. So, this goes back, Tyrell asked about exposure, but when you think about actually starting to put your dollars to work, what advice would you give to someone?
So I'm not a financial advisor or registered investor advisor, but I am a venture capitalist and I can talk about my own particular experience. So you'll learn in the class to say that. There are different formulas people use in terms of like how much of your disposable income and or your wealth should be invested. Some people will say 10 to 15% of your investment should be in alternative asset class. This counts as an alternative asset class.
Because it's higher risk.
It's
right?
because it's higher risk. Other alternative asset classes are like real estate. Real estate is an example of an alternative asset class. Some people now would include crypto. Some people would include gold, other commodities that are outside of the traditional stocks and bonds and insurance or investment vehicles that most people have access to. So you're in the alternative asset class. I'll be honest, because this is high risk, I still to this day only invest what I am willing to lose. And I invest according to an investment thesis. We're going to teach you in the certificate how to develop your own investment thesis. I often say to founders, don't pitch me until you know my pain. And what I mean is, I didn't just show up here today. I'm a person, I'm a human, and my interests are created based upon what I had to pursue, whether that's in career, skills, jobs, industry, supply chain, what have you. And that's how investors develop an investment thesis out of their experience and the value. Everyone has that value. You may have a particular interest. It may be life sciences, health tech. It may be enterprise software because you work in enterprise. It might be consumer technology because you work at a CPG company and you understand products. You might like social impact. You might like artificial intelligence because you like the AI. People come up with all types of reasons of why they choose an investment class. And the key is frequency and consistency. You have to be frequent, you have to be consistent. And you might only be able to make one investment a year for a certain amount. Every year you're gonna find a deal, you're gonna get in that deal. You may discover that you don't want to do the diligence, you want to be passive, and so venture funds are a way for you. Venture funds usually have certain minimums, and the minimums can be large because venture funds have a maximum amount of investment. So if I'm doing a $100 million fund, I can't give a slide to someone for $5,000 because I only have 99 positions. Most people don't understand that. So you have to figure that out. And we're going to present all of those alternatives, and then we're going to talk about equity crowdfunding and how powerful of a mechanism where you can invest in startups for as little as $100. I'll give you all an example. This is someone you should know in Black tech, Angela Benton. Angela Benton was the founder of the Lumi Accelerator, the first minority accelerator in Silicon Valley. I remember when Angela had Web 2.0, and she, which was a website highlighting Black people in tech. This is free Blavity, free Apple Tech, free Kingonomics. And she was working for this startup called Rushmore Drive that had raised like $40 million. They wanted to be like the Black group, another search. They didn't make it. And when that company was winding down, Angela was trying to figure out what to do next. She talked to me about maybe joining the startup I was working on at the time. That didn't pan out. I said, Angela, you need to be in Silicon Valley. Other people were telling me to go to Silicon Valley. So she trusted. She went to Silicon Valley, rented out a house, started running this accelerator. Well, long story short, she eventually exited. She sold the community program to Eship, which is Brian Brackeen and Candace. You'll meet Ryan Brackeen. They have a $50 million fund. Brian's an engineer, self-taught developer, focuses on AI and machine learning. Like you will literally meet these people in the certificate. So she has a new startup called Streamalytics. When she wanted to raise capital for her business, rather than go to traditional angel venture capitalists, because she knows the data. Currently, less than 1% of that capital goes to Black and brown founders. You know what she did? She said, I'm going to do equity crowdfunding. She went to one of the approved crowdfunding sites. She went through the process. She got approved. She raised her first $1 million in less than a week. And I'm proud to say I was her first $2,500 investment. You may say, I can do $2,500. I can do $500. She raised it. My investment is already, on paper increased by 2 to 3x because she came back and is doing her Series A round. No, she's doing a bridge round. We'll talk about the different rounds. So because she raised that round at a higher valuation, which is the value that you put on the company. Sometimes it can be ambiguous, sometimes you can put it out of the sky. And sometimes it can seem like you got some science to it, but we know we really just put it out of the sky. Right? Jason's here, he knows. We pretend that we know what we're doing. But you kind of get good at it after a while. You kind of know what stuff fits in. I'm not trying to teach the whole class, but when you start, some people, if you go through equity crowdfunding, it might be $100. For some people, it might be $50,000, $100,000. It just really depends on what your risk tolerance is, and also what other value can you get out of it. You may be a passive investor, but if it's an enterprise company, you may have tons of contacts in your personal Rolodex that you can make introductions. So I tend to invest in companies that I also believe that my platform can help them. That's a part of my investment thesis. Everyone has to develop their own personal investment thesis, and that includes how much discretionary, capital you can apply. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was super helpful. All right.
Everybody's gonna have to enroll in the class now. Get the certificate.
Well, and I think one of the important things to think through there is there's actually something that every single person in this room and online can do, right? They can enroll in the class, or one of the things that has come up as a theme and what all of y'all talk about is the stories. So, Tyrell talked about exposure, right? And asked about exposure. Part of that is telling stories and working together. There's a number of different people who've done amazing work here locally. How do we connect all of those things together? How do we elevate those stories? Jes has a book that she wrote that's talking about stories, right? And so, anyway, I think that's a very important thing to think about. What can we all do as individuals? So, all right, we're wrapping up here. I know that we want to talk to some people here. I'm going to ask each of y'all to just do a parting comment. And it could be a call to action. It could be an encouragement, whatever y'all want to say to our in-person and virtual audience. So, we're going to let Rodney go last this time. Ray, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, this is very easy. First off, Vickie, thank you for having us. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having this. This has been amazing. I think the question about the call to action and what we do and how we encourage people is by continuing these conversations and continuing to put out our history and continuing to go to the future. So that's what I'd say. Everybody continue to have these conversations and continue to look to the future.
Yes.
I guess I would say there's strength in community. Find your people. Get serious about this. I'm getting serious about this. It's an exciting moment, and you want to be in the moment, not watching
So we'll make this pledge, knowing our role. We'll work with Rodney and the universities involved. We'll put up some cash for some scholarship. We'll, I got the closer sitting next to me. I whispered in my ear while you were talking. I'm afraid to make that just for full disclosure, we had a planning call as you would expect, and he already tried to close me that on a pretty good amount. But we'll get the details out, and I'm sure that will be channels articulate. For those that are online, sorry if you're out of state, I can already tell you that we won't do. We kind of roll for our friends here in North Carolina, but we'll get the details out, and hopefully it'll be yet another thing that we can do for the community.
Absolutely. I'd just like to say thank you, Jes, for this connection. Thank you, Vickie, for working with Greg, Scott, Jill, entire team, Sean, to make this happen. We've been having weekly calls since probably March of, literally since March of last year, I believe. So we've been putting in work. And so we invite you all to come put in some work with us, and we won't let you down. We're going to work hard so that you can have a meaningful experience. And, look, I'm a Tulane and Penn State and Keller guy. I might have to go through something to get a credential from UNC, and Duke and Stanford. Have three schools ever work together to offer something like this. And we will be bringing in some HBCUs. We have HBCUs that are interested in offering an iteration of this and kind of growing it in the future. So I think we're just getting started, and we invite you to come along with us on this certificate and the day of certificate. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Thank you all for being on the panel. Thank you for Rodney for the partnership and the work. Really appreciate it. And thank all of you for everything you do in our community here. So thank you, everyone who is here in person. Thank you to everyone online. Really look forward to seeing y'all in class.